It happened so quickly. I barely had time to react. One moment, everything was fine. Sunlight streaming through the trees, a gentle breeze. The charming cobblestone streets of a picturesque village in the south of France. Daniel and I were supposed to be on the trip of a lifetime. But the next moment, everything fell apart. The argument started small, like most fights do. A passing comment here, a raised voice there, the usual stuff that's easy to brush off when you're on vacation. But this time, I could feel it building, a tension I couldn't ignore. I tried to keep my voice calm, tried to suggest that we just head back to the hotel and call it a day. But Daniel? He was already several glasses deep, egged on by his friends, all of them laughing like it was some kind of joke. "You always do this, Marie," Daniel slurred, his words getting more jagged as he gestured wildly. "Always acting like you know better. Always telling me how to live. You're so controlling." His voice was thick with alcohol, but the venom in his words hit harder than anything I'd ever heard. I could feel my chest tightening, my heart beating faster as the blood rushed to my ears. I tried to stay composed, to reason with him, but his friends just laughed louder. Pete, one of his college buddies, leaned back in his chair and grinned, a little too smug for my liking. "Come on, man. Just let her have her way. What's the worst that could happen?" And just like that, the tipping point came. Daniel stood up, knocking his chair over with a crash that echoed through the quiet street. "You know what?" he spat, looking at me with a coldness I hadn't seen in years. "If you're so unhappy, why don't you just figure it out on your own?" I froze. The world around me seemed to collapse into silence as he turned and walked away, his friends still chuckling behind him. The laughter echoed in my ears, distant, unreal. I stood there, unable to move, my mouth open mid-sentence, the words hanging uselessly in the air. "Daniel?" I whispered, but my voice was barely a breath. My body was numb, and the reality of what had just happened began to settle over me like a dark cloud. This wasn't just a fight. It wasn't some petty argument that could be smoothed over with an apology. No, this was something different. I reached for my phone, hoping he'd come to his senses and call me back, but nothing. No response. I sent texts, left messages, nothing. He was blocking me. Not just physically, but emotionally, and I knew it. I could feel the walls closing in around me, suffocating me. Was this really happening? Was he really going to leave me here alone? In this strange town, just because of a stupid fight? The sky above us began to darken, the sun setting slowly behind the horizon, casting long shadows across the street. The village, which had seemed so beautiful when we first arrived, now felt cold and alien. I looked at my phone again, the screen now showing 27 missed calls from Daniel, all of them sent straight to voicemail. His friends? Blocked. All of them. Even the ones who had been laughing and cheering him on, telling him to just leave her. The knot in my stomach twisted tighter. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't some impulsive reaction. This was deliberate. He had planned this, and I was the one left to face the consequences. I tried to hold it together. I told myself that he would come back, that this was just a bad joke, and that everything would go back to normal. It had to, right? But as the night wore on, the realization hit me harder than anything else. He wasn't coming back. I had been left behind, abandoned in the middle of nowhere. I spent the next few hours pacing the streets, my mind racing. My phone's battery was running low, and my money was almost gone. I tried to find a hotel, but everywhere was either too expensive or fully booked. Finally, I found a cheap little inn above a bakery, a tiny room with a narrow bed and a sink in the corner. The elderly woman who showed me to my room barely spoke a word of English, but there was something in her eyes, a sympathy, a knowing that cut through me. I sank onto the bed, exhausted, my mind still reeling. This wasn't just a bad day. This was my life falling apart. And there I was, stuck in a foreign country, with no way to get back, no one to call, and no idea what came next. The next morning, I woke up to the harsh reality of being alone. My phone had died during the night, and when I tried to call Daniel again, there was nothing. No response.
No epalegi.
And that's when I made the decision. I wasn't going to wait around anymore. I wasn't going to keep clinging to the hope that he'd come back for me. I was done. The morning light barely filtered through the thin curtains of my tiny room. The smell of freshly baked bread from the bakery below crept into my nostrils, reminding me of how life was supposed to be simple, full of comfort. But not today. Today, the simplicity of this village felt suffocating. I could still hear Daniel's laughter, ringing in my ears from the night before. It wasn't real laughter anymore. It was the sound of abandonment. He had left me here, stranded, in this small French town, with nothing but a single suitcase and a broken heart. The anger I felt was cold, raw. I'd spent years sacrificing my own dreams, my own sense of self, just to make him happy. And this was the result. I checked my phone again. No new messages. No calls. It was as if I had vanished from his world entirely. I hadn't even heard his voice since he'd driven off, with that smirk plastered on his face. The knot in my stomach twisted tighter, and for a moment, I thought I might suffocate under the weight of it all. I couldn't just sit here, waiting for him to change his mind. The thought of going back to our hotel and sitting idly by, hoping he'd realize what a mistake he'd made, was unbearable. I knew better. I knew this was not a mistake. This was a message, an ugly, cruel message, that I meant nothing to him. There had to be a way out. I dragged myself out of bed and made my way downstairs. The innkeeper greeted me with a warm smile, but her eyes seemed to soften when she saw my face. I nodded a thank you and left, the door closing softly behind me. The street outside looked exactly the same as it had the night before. Only now it felt like a prison. The village square was bustling, people chatting in groups outside cafes, their voices a backdrop to my inner storm. I passed them, my eyes fixed on the ground, the weight of the morning's reality sinking in with every step. It wasn't until I reached the corner of the street that I realized how little I had. I checked my wallet again. €80. Not even enough for a one-way flight back home. I would have to make do with whatever was left. And there were no credit cards to back me up, no safety net. I'd handed that control to Daniel. And now, I was paying for it. Desperation kicked in. I wasn't going to let this be the end of my story, not like this. I couldn't go back to the life I had. That life, the life where I had to make myself small to fit into Daniel's world, was over. I needed a plan. Fast. I walked down to the nearest bank and withdrew all the money I could from the small amount left in my account. With shaky hands, I looked at the bills in my palm, each one a reminder of how quickly things had spiraled out of control. I had no choice now. I had to leave this town. I didn't know where I was going or how I was going to survive. But I knew I couldn't stay here. A bus station sat at the edge of the village. I hadn't paid much attention to it before, but now it was my only option. I approached the counter, my heart hammering in my chest. The woman behind the counter looked up at me, her expression neutral but kind. She must have noticed my disheveled appearance, the way my hands trembled as I asked for the next available bus. To where? She asked in broken English, her voice soft but firm. Anywhere, I replied, swallowing hard. Just somewhere far from here. She raised an eyebrow but said nothing more, only pointing to the bus schedule on the wall. The next bus to Nice, a coastal town, was leaving in an hour. The fare wasn't cheap, but it was my best shot. I paid what I had left and watched as the bus pulled away, taking me further away from the life I'd been living, further away from Daniel. As I sat on the bus, my mind raced with questions. What now? What would I do when I got there? Would I find a job? A place to stay? I had nothing but a suitcase, a small amount of money, and the hope that somehow I would figure it out. The journey felt like an eternity. The scenery outside was beautiful, with rolling hills and vineyards stretching as far as the eye could see. But none of it registered. I couldn't focus on the beauty of the landscape. My mind was still back in that cafe, still hearing Daniel's voice, still feeling the sting of his words. By the time the bus arrived in Nice, the sun was beginning to set. The cool air of the Mediterranean hit me as I stepped off the bus, the streets filled with people moving in all directions. I could feel the buzz of the city, the vibrancy, but it felt foreign. Nothing felt real. Not even the ground beneath my feet. I had nowhere to go. I wandered through the streets for hours, aimlessly, trying to get my bearings. At one point, I stopped to catch my breath outside a small cafe, and a woman sitting nearby noticed me. She was older, her face lined with age, but kind. "You look lost," she said gently, her voice carrying an air of compassion. I looked at her, unsure of how to respond. I had no plan, no words to explain why I was standing here in the middle of the night, a stranger in a foreign city. I said softly, my voice breaking. "I don't know what to do." The woman smiled, a warm, knowing smile, and patted the seat next to her. "Come, sit with me. I'll buy you a coffee." And that was how I met Leah, the woman who would change everything. The night felt endless. The city was alive around me, but all I could hear was the hammering of my own heart. I walked aimlessly through the streets of Nice, each step heavier than the last, the weight of my own helplessness threatening to swallow me whole. The people around me seemed like they were in their own world, laughing, chatting, walking hand in hand. But for me, it was different. I was drowning in a sea of uncertainty, alone in a foreign country with nothing but
Leah
the bitter
had offered
taste
me a
of
seat
betrayal.
at her
Table, a simple kindness that felt like a lifeline in that moment. But even as I accepted, something in my gut twisted. Her eyes, full of compassion, reminded me of everything I had left behind. A life, a marriage, a future. But that future had been ripped away from me in a heartbeat. I had hoped, so desperately, that Daniel would call, that he'd realize the severity of what he'd done. Maybe he'd come to his senses and apologize, or at the very least, send me the money to get back to America.
But no call came.
No message. Not even an apology. The silence was suffocating. The silence spoke louder than anything he could have said. "Where are you going?" Leah asked quietly, breaking the silence that had settled between us. Her voice was soft, but there was an underlying concern in her tone. I stared into the darkened streets, watching the lights of passing cars streak by. My mind raced, but I couldn't find an answer. I had no idea where I was going. "I don't know," I whispered, the words barely escaping my lips. "But I can't stay here." Leah studied me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Finally, she reached out and placed a hand gently on mine. You can stay with me for a little while," she said, her voice warm but firm. "It's not much, but you'll be safe. You can figure things out here." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to hold on to the tiny thread of hope that maybe, just maybe, things could still be okay. But deep down, I knew that even if I stayed with her, I would still be stuck. Stuck in this situation. Stuck with Daniel's betrayal haunting every thought.
No.
I couldn't stay here. I couldn't let myself become dependent on someone else, not again. I forced a smile, though it felt unnatural on my face. Thank you, Leah. But I can't. I need to keep moving forward. She didn't press me, but I could see the concern in her eyes. I could see the pity, too, and it made my skin crawl. Promise me you'll take care of yourself, she said softly, her voice cracking slightly. I promise, I replied, though I wasn't sure I believed it. I stood up, thanked her one last time, and made my way back to the bus station. The bus to Paris was leaving in an hour, and I had enough money to buy a ticket. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get me away from Nice. And that was all that mattered. As I stood in line at the ticket counter, my pulse quickened. The thought of leaving Nice, of leaving everything behind, felt like a fresh start, but at what cost? I didn't know where I would go once I reached Paris. I didn't know what my future held. But that wasn't what mattered anymore. What mattered was that I was taking control. I was choosing my own path, even if I didn't have all the answers. The man at the counter looked at me with mild interest as I handed over the money for the ticket. He didn't ask questions. He didn't care. I was just another stranger passing through. And that was exactly how I wanted it. No more questions. No more reminders of the life I had once shared with Daniel. I boarded the bus, finding a seat by the window. The engine roared to life, and we pulled out of the station, the city lights of Nice fading behind me. I leaned my head against the cool glass, my eyes closing as I tried to breathe. I had to keep moving. I couldn't stop now. Underscore 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 underscore. A few hours later, as the bus rumbled through the countryside, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach. Something was wrong. Something wasn't right. I'd only been on the bus for a couple of hours when I felt the sharp vibration of my phone in my pocket. My heart jumped in my chest. Was it Daniel? Finally, I pulled the phone out, trembling. But it wasn't his name that flashed on the screen. It was a private number. I answered it on instinct, not knowing who it was, but hoping beyond hope that maybe it was someone who could help me. Murray? A voice crackled through the phone, and I froze. It was Daniel. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. The anger, the betrayal. Everything I had been holding inside rushed to the surface like a tidal wave. I know where you are, he said, his voice calm, almost too calm. I've been trying to reach you. This has gone on long enough. You're coming back home. I'm coming for you. You'll be back in the States before you know it. My heart pounded in my chest as I fought to control my breathing. How dare he? How could he just show up like this, like everything was fine, like he hadn't just abandoned me in a foreign country? You think I'm coming back? I hissed, my voice shaking with a mix of fury and disbelief. You think I'm going to just go back to that life, to you, after what you did? I heard him sigh. Marie, you're being dramatic. You're acting like a child. This isn't funny anymore. I'm not going to let you throw everything away. I could feel the rage bubbling up inside me. You've already thrown everything away, Daniel. You left me here to rot. And you know what? I'm done. I hung up on him, the phone shaking in my hand as I stared out of the window. The darkness outside the bus was like the emptiness inside me. I didn't know what to do next, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going back to him.
Not now.
Not ever. The bus continued on, and so did I. The bus reached Paris early the next morning. its wheels rumbling over the cobblestone streets, shaking me from the restless sleep I'd managed to get. I didn't know what I expected from the city, maybe a fresh start, or maybe just a distraction from the storm raging in my mind. But the moment I stepped off the bus, I knew Paris wasn't the answer. The city was too big, too overwhelming. It felt like the weight of the world pressed down on me. The streets were crowded with people rushing in every direction, tourists snapping pictures, locals in a hurry. It was so alive, so busy. But I felt as though I was the only one who wasn't part of it. I pulled my suitcase behind me, feeling the weight of my choices settle deeper into my bones. Where would I go? What was I supposed to do now? I couldn't stay in Paris, not without money, not without a plan. I couldn't just wander aimlessly, hoping something would happen. I needed something more. I turned the corner, passing a small cafe tucked away on a side street, when I saw her.
Leah.
At first, I thought it was a mirage, something I was imagining in my desperation. But there she was, sitting at a table outside, sipping her coffee. I walked closer, hesitating, unsure if I should even approach. The night before, she'd offered me kindness. And now I wasn't sure if I could accept it again. But she saw me before I could turn away. "Marie," she called, waving me over with a smile. "I knew I'd find you here. You look like you could use another coffee." I stood frozen for a moment, my heart pounding in my chest. I hadn't expected to see her, let alone have her reach out. But here she was, offering a lifeline once again.
I didn't know what to say.
"Leah, I don't know what I'm doing here," I said, sitting down at her table, suddenly feeling like I could collapse from exhaustion. The adrenaline from last night was wearing off, leaving me shaky and uncertain. Leah studied me for a moment, her kind eyes full of understanding. "You don't have to figure it all out right away, Marie. We all get lost sometimes. But I think you've already made one important choice. You've left. You've chosen yourself. That's not easy." Her words struck me harder than I expected. I had left. I had chosen to get away, to take control of my own life. It hadn't been easy, but it had been necessary. "I don't know where I'm going," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper.
I'm scared, Leah.
"I'm scared that I'll never be able to move on from all this." She nodded, her expression soft but firm. "Of course you're scared. But you're not alone. And you don't have to do it all at once. I can help you." Her offer of help was a comfort, but I couldn't help the nagging feeling in my chest. I had come to Paris to escape everything, but now it seemed like I was being pulled right back into someone else's kindness. Was I just going to rely on her forever? I couldn't do that. But Leah's presence was warm and reassuring. She saw something in me, something I didn't quite see in myself. Maybe she could help me find a way out of this mess. Maybe I could learn to rely on someone again, without it feeling like I was losing myself. "I don't know if I can take more help," I said, my voice trembling with the weight of everything I'd been holding back. "I'm afraid of becoming dependent again, of letting someone control me, like Daniel did." Leah looked at me, her gaze steady and unwavering. "I'm not asking you to depend on me, Marie. I'm asking you to trust yourself. You've already taken the hardest step by walking away from him.
Now,
let's see what you can do for yourself." Her words were like a breath of fresh air, a chance to finally breathe, to stand on my own 2 feet, free from the past. "I've always been so focused on trying to make things work with him," I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "I gave up everything for him, for his career, for our life."
but what about me?
"What about what I want?" Leah smiled, a warm, knowing smile. "You're starting to see it, aren't you? It's never been about him. It's been about you all along. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. She was right. I had sacrificed so much of myself to make Daniel happy. But in doing that, I had lost sight of who I really was. I don't know where to start, I said, shaking my head. I have nothing left.
No job.
No career. No plan. You have you, Leah replied softly. And that's all you need. I felt a weight lift from my chest, though I still didn't know what the next step would be. I couldn't plan everything out. Maybe I didn't need to. Maybe the only thing I needed was to trust that I could handle whatever came next. Leah and I sat in that cafe for hours, talking about everything and nothing. She shared stories about her own struggles, her own journey to build a life in Paris. We talked about love, loss, and how easy it is to lose sight of who we are when we're wrapped up in someone else's world. By the time I stood up to leave, the fear that had gripped me earlier seemed less suffocating. I wasn't sure of my future, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could take control of it. Thank you, I said to Leah, my voice full of gratitude. You've given me more than I can ever repay. She laughed softly. Just take care of yourself, Marie. That's enough for me. As I walked away from the cafe, I didn't know what was waiting for me. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally moving forward. The future, unknown as it was, suddenly seemed full of possibility. The weeks that followed felt like a blur, a strange mixture of uncertainty and quiet hope. I stayed with Leah in Paris, though it was never meant to be permanent. She had offered me a place to rest, to figure things out, and I did just that. Slowly, tentatively, I started to piece myself back together, one small step at a time. The mornings were the hardest. The silence of the apartment, the empty hours that stretched before me, gave me far too much time to think. But that was what I needed, wasn't it?
Time.
Time to breathe, to think, and to confront the one question that had haunted me for so long. Who am I without him? Each morning, I sat by the small window in the living room, the city of Paris sprawling beneath me, its beauty both inspiring and suffocating. I wanted to love it. I wanted to embrace this new life I was building, but the shadows of my past, of Daniel, of the life I had once known, still clung to me. Every glance at my phone, every thought that crossed my mind, carried a lingering sense of what was lost. I knew I had to make a choice. I couldn't just sit in this apartment forever. I couldn't keep waiting for the world to offer me an answer. It was one morning, while I was sipping a cup of coffee, that I made my decision. I would return to the one thing I'd left behind for Daniel, the one thing that had once made me feel alive. Interior design. When I had first met Daniel, I was on the brink of launching my own design business. But when he became successful, I put my dreams aside to support his career. I followed him wherever his work took us, keeping our home, handling the social calendar, playing the role of the perfect wife. But somewhere along the way, I had lost myself in the process. I couldn't let that happen anymore. Leah had been watching me carefully, as if she knew what was coming. The first time I mentioned getting back into design, she smiled, her eyes lighting up with encouragement. You should, she said simply. You have an incredible talent, Marie. Don't waste it. Her support gave me the courage to start looking for opportunities. The thought of diving back into a career that once seemed like my only path was terrifying, but it also felt like a lifeline. I didn't need to be dependent on anyone else, not on Daniel, not on Leah. I needed to stand on my own 2 feet again. I started reaching out to friends in the industry, asking about freelance opportunities, offering my services. The responses came slowly at first, but I didn't mind. Every email, every conversation felt like a small victory. Slowly, I rebuilt my portfolio, reconnecting with the part of myself I had buried for so long. The real breakthrough came when I met Sophie, a well-known architect in Paris who had been looking for someone to collaborate with on a new project. She had heard about my work through a mutual contact and wanted to meet. When we sat down at a cafe to discuss the project, I could feel the familiar spark of excitement rising in my chest. This was it. This was the moment that would define who I was going to be. Sophie was a whirlwind of energy, her passion for design infectious. "I've heard you're one of the best in the business," she said with a grin. "I've got a big project coming up and I need someone who can see things in a different light. I need someone who isn't afraid to push boundaries." That was the moment I realized I wasn't just going to survive this. I was going to thrive. We agreed to work together on the project, a luxury hotel redesign in the heart of Paris. It wasn't much at first, just a few design concepts and some initial plans, but it was mine. It was something I had created, something that had nothing to do with Daniel. Nothing to do with the past I had left behind. And so I dove in. The work was intense, the hours long, but I felt alive again. Each design, each choice, felt like I was reclaiming a piece of myself that had been lost for years. There was a fire inside me now, one I hadn't realized had been smoldering all along. Underscore, 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 underscore. But as I threw myself into the project, another battle raged quietly within me. Every now and then, my phone would ring, an unknown number, a private number. And every time, my heart would skip a beat, my breath would catch. Part of me wanted to answer, to hear Daniel's voice, to hear him beg for my forgiveness. But another part of me, an angry, stronger part, knew I couldn't go back. I had learned something in these past few weeks. I didn't need him. I didn't need anyone who couldn't see me for who I was. One night, while I was working late on the hotel designs, my phone buzzed on the desk. The screen lit up and I froze. It was him, Daniel. The temptation to pick up was almost overwhelming. I couldn't stop the mix of emotions that surged within me, the anger, the hurt, and that small, lingering part of me that still missed the man I had once loved. I stared at the phone for a long time, my fingers hovering over the screen. I could feel the weight of the past pressing down on me. But then something shifted. I took a deep breath and put the phone face down on the desk. I didn't need his voice. I didn't need to hear his apology. The decision had already been made. I was done. The next day, I packed up my things and moved into a small apartment near the design office. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I didn't have to share it with anyone, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe freely. As I settled into my new space, I realized that the freedom I had fought so hard for wasn't just about leaving Daniel behind. It was about finding the courage to reclaim my life, to take back the dreams that had been stolen from me. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. And for the first time in a long time, I believed that maybe, just maybe, I could build something even better than I had before. It had been 3 months since I moved into the small apartment near the design office. 3 months since I'd left everything behind. My old life, my marriage, the past that had haunted me for so long. Each day felt like a new victory. Each project I completed brought me one step closer to the life I had dreamed of before Daniel had made me small. The world was starting to make sense again. The city felt less like a maze and more like a place where I was building my own future. But just as I was starting to feel comfortable in my new life, my past came crashing back. The email was brief, its subject line simple. "I'm coming for you." It was from Daniel. The words on the screen were clear, cold, and final. I've been trying to reach you. This has gone on long enough. I've hired a private investigator, and I know exactly where you are. I'm coming to Paris to bring you home. You're not running away from me anymore. I felt the familiar twist in my gut, the combination of anger, fear, and disbelief. After all this time, after everything he'd done to me, he still thought he could dictate my life. He still thought he could control me. My hand shook as I closed the email and stared at the screen. My breath came in short bursts, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew he would come for me. I had expected it. But now that it was real, now that it was actually happening, I wasn't sure how to respond. For the first time since I had left him, I was afraid. Afraid of what he might say. Afraid of what he might do. But then, something inside me clicked. This wasn't about him. This wasn't about what he wanted.
This was about me.
This was about protecting the life I had started to rebuild. I didn't need him. I didn't need his approval, his apologies, or his manipulative attempts to bring me back into his world. The message was clear. I had to make a decision. Again. Underscore, 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 underscore. 3 days later, as the sun began to set over Paris, I stood in front of my apartment. My pulse racing. He was here. Daniel had arrived. I knew he'd try to talk me into coming back, but I wouldn't give in this time. I couldn't. I had already spent too many years living in his shadow. Too many years convincing myself that my worth was tied to his success. That I existed to serve his needs. I heard the familiar hum of a rental car engine as it pulled up outside. My stomach tightened. I didn't want to do this, but I knew I had no choice. This was the moment I'd been dreading, but also the moment I'd been preparing for. I stepped outside, my heart pounding. He was standing there, his expensive sunglasses perched on his perfectly coiffed head, his designer shirt crisp and neat. He looked the same, polished, controlled, as if nothing had changed. As if nothing should change. He saw me and froze. I could see the recognition in his eyes, the disbelief. I hadn't looked this way when I left, so raw, so different. And yet, here I was standing before him. Not the woman he had abandoned, but someone else entirely. Marie, he said, his voice cold, but attempting to mask the panic beneath it. What is this? Where did you go? You don't belong here. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. You don't get to tell me where I belong anymore, Daniel. His face faltered, the charm slipping away as he took a step toward me. You don't know what you're doing. This isn't you. You're making a huge mistake. We had a life, a good life. You're throwing it all away for this? For me, I said, the words coming out more forcefully than I intended. I'm throwing it away for myself. For the life I want to build, not the life you gave me. You didn't let me be me, Daniel. You only let me be what you wanted me to be. He took another step, his eyes narrowing. You think you're better than me now? You think this little design project you're working on is enough to replace everything we had? To replace us? His words were a slap, but they didn't have the sting they once did. They no longer had the power to make me doubt myself. No, Daniel, I replied, my voice calm and steady. It's not about replacing anything. It's about moving forward. I don't want to go back to that life. I don't want to go back to you. I saw the anger flash in his eyes. For a moment, he looked like the man I had known so long ago, The man who controlled everything. The man who thought he could fix everything with money, with charm, with his status. But that man was gone. And I wasn't going back to him. He opened his mouth to say something, but I cut him off. You've already taken everything from me, Daniel. The only thing you didn't take was my ability to choose. And I choose to stay here. I choose this life. I pulled out the envelope from my pocket, the divorce papers. I handed them to him, my hand steady, my heart clear. I'm done, Daniel. This is over. He stared at the papers, disbelief painting his face. You can't be serious, he muttered, his voice shaking with a mix of anger and hurt. You're going to throw away everything we built? This isn't about us anymore, I said firmly.
This is about me.
It's always been about me. You left me in that small town. You thought I'd just fall apart. But I didn't. I started over. And I'm not looking back. The silence between us was thick, suffocating. I could feel the weight of everything. The years of control, the years of sacrifice, the years of being made to feel small. He turned away, his shoulders slumped. You'll regret this, he said, his voice weak, almost pleading. I already have, Daniel. I replied, my voice softening just for a moment. But I'd rather risk regret from the choices I made than live with the certainty of regret from the choices you made for me. With that, he walked away, his footsteps heavy against the cobblestones, disappearing down the street. I watched him go, a strange sense of relief washing over me. I was free. As I stood there in front of my apartment, the city of Paris stretching before me, I realized that this was the moment I had been waiting for. The moment when I truly let go. Not just of Daniel, but of the life he had forced on me. The future was wide open. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready to step into it, on my own terms. The days that followed Daniel's departure felt like a strange, surreal blur. At first, I was almost numb, as if I had been holding my breath for so long that I couldn't quite exhale. The apartment, which had once felt like a temporary space, now felt like a home, my home. Every corner seemed to whisper of possibility, of a future that was finally mine to shape. I had expected to feel a sense of loss, to mourn the years I had spent living in someone else's shadow. But instead, there was only an overwhelming sense of relief. The weight that had been on my chest for so long had finally lifted. I had taken control of my own life, and it felt right. It wasn't perfect. I didn't have all the answers, and there were days when the doubts crept in, when the old fears resurfaced, but I had something now that I hadn't had in years. Confidence. I had the confidence to make choices for myself, to live for myself. It was a new kind of freedom that felt both terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into my work. The hotel project with Sophie continued to progress, and I found myself more and more immersed in the process. Every design choice, every color palette, every material I chose felt like I was creating something entirely new, not just for the hotel, but for myself. The hours were long, but I didn't mind. I had been waiting for something like this, something that made me feel alive again, something that allowed me to reclaim my worth. Sophie was more than just a colleague. She was a mentor, someone who had taken a chance on me, and in return, I gave everything I had to the project. But she also gave me something even more valuable, validation. She believed in my talent, my vision. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was just tagging along. I wasn't just Daniel's wife anymore. I was Marie, a designer, a woman with purpose.
And yet,
even as my professional life flourished, something still gnawed at me, a sense that I hadn't fully let go of the past. Daniel's shadow still lingered, though I had tried so hard to banish it. Every time I thought I had moved on, a part of me would pause, would question whether I had done the right thing. I thought about him less and less, but the weight of the betrayal still haunted me. One rainy afternoon, I took a walk through the city, the kind of walk that used to be our thing, my way of escaping the apartment, of clearing my mind. The cobblestone streets were wet, the sky overcast, and I found myself wandering through neighborhoods I hadn't seen before. I passed through cafes with their windows fogged from the heat of the inside, and I watched families sitting together, laughing, their children playing nearby. It was beautiful, the kind of life I had always wanted but had never allowed myself to live. I found myself at a small park in the heart of the city, one of those hidden places where the chaos of Paris seemed miles away. I sat on a bench and closed my eyes, letting the sound of the rain and the distant chatter of people soothe me. I had finally found peace in the city, peace in my own life. That's when I heard it, a familiar voice, one I hadn't heard in months. Marie. I froze. I didn't have to turn around. I knew who it was. I could hear the hesitation in his voice, the way it cracked slightly as if he were uncertain of how to approach me. My heart skipped a beat, and for a moment, I felt the old fear return. The fear that maybe, just maybe, I had made a mistake. That he might have come to take me back, to fix everything.
But no.
I wasn't that woman anymore. I slowly turned around to face him, and there he was, Daniel, standing at the edge of the park, looking like he had just stepped out of a magazine. His clothes were pristine, his face as carefully arranged as always. He was exactly as I remembered him, but I was different. I stood up slowly, my feet planted firmly on the ground. I didn't need to be afraid. Not anymore. Marie, his voice trailed off as he took a tentative step toward me, his eyes searching mine for something, some sign that I might still be the woman he had left behind. But there was no sign of that woman. That woman was gone. What do you want, Daniel? I asked, my voice calm but firm. It felt strange, saying his name again, but there was no anger in it. I was beyond anger. I was beyond him. He hesitated, clearly struggling for the right words. I've been thinking about everything. About what I did. I was wrong, Marie.
I'm sorry.
I know I hurt you. I never should have left you. I didn't say anything at first. I just stood there, watching him. My heart steady now. You don't get to apologize and expect me to just come back, I said finally. I'm not that woman anymore. You broke me, Daniel. You broke everything we had. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me. You gave me the freedom I didn't even know I was suffocating without. He looked stunned by my words, his face paling as he processed them. Marie, he started, but I shook my head, cutting him off. You had your chance, I said, my voice stronger now. You chose to leave me. You chose to walk away. And I chose to walk away from you, too. But I'm not the same person I was when you left. I've rebuilt my life without you. Daniel stood there, silent, as the words sank in. I could see the flicker of regret in his eyes. But it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. I have a life here, Daniel. A real life. And I'm not going to throw it away just to go back to what you think I should be. I'm not your accessory anymore. I'm me. His expression softened, but I could see the underlying hurt beneath it. I'm sorry, Marie, he said quietly, his voice breaking. But it didn't matter. His apology didn't matter anymore. I've already forgiven you, I said, my voice gentle. But forgiveness doesn't mean I want to go back. It means I've moved on. And so should you. I turned and walked away, my steps sure and steady. For the first time in my life, I felt the weight of the past lift completely. The shadow was gone. As I walked down the path, The city of Paris stretching out before me, I realized something I hadn't truly understood before. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. And this life, this was mine. As I stand here today, looking back on everything that's happened, I can finally say it. I am free. Free from the man who tried to control me. Free from the fears that once held me back. Free from the life I thought I had to live. It hasn't been easy. The road to this point has been full of heartache, confusion, and moments where I questioned whether I'd ever find my way. But each step, each decision I made to walk away from the life I had built with Daniel led me to the person I am now. Strong, independent, at peace. For so long, I thought my worth was tied to someone else's approval. I thought my value came from being the perfect wife, the supportive partner, the one who always put everyone else's needs ahead of my own. But in the end, I learned that the only approval I truly needed was my own. The only life I truly needed to live was my own. I will never forget the pain of being abandoned, of being made to feel like I wasn't enough. But that pain has taught me something invaluable. I am enough. Just as I am. I've learned to trust myself, to listen to my own heart, and to choose a path that aligns with my true desires. And most importantly, I've learned that my happiness doesn't depend on anyone else. It depends on me. So now, as I continue forward, creating a new life, a life filled with my own passions and dreams, I carry with me a sense of empowerment that I never thought possible. I am not the woman I was before. I am someone new, someone who knows her worth. And no matter what the future holds, I know one thing for sure. I will never again let anyone dictate who I am or what I deserve. I choose me, and that, finally, is enough.